I've been hesitating to make this video for a while. I really like Jet Set Radio, but I realized one day that I enjoy the music, art, and world more than I enjoy the actual game itself. But first, I need to catch some of you up to speed. What is Jet Set Radio? Jet Set Radio is a skating game released in the year 2000 by Sega and developed for the Sega Dreamcast. It focuses on a street gang called the GGs, and the game's story is told primarily through the underground radio station Jet Set Radio, hosted by DJ Professor K. The way I initially played the game was the notoriously bad Android port from the 2010s. Now, I did enjoy the game at the time, though looking back, it was pretty rough, especially on my Samsung Galaxy S2. I did eventually wind up playing the Dreamcast version via emulation and later buying the Steam port, but by the time I played the PC port, I'd already felt the way I did about the game currently. I just never really thought about it. I don't think this is bad, but I thought I should replay the game to reaffirm the way I feel about it. I especially wanted to sit down and replay the game before playing Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, a spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio that aims to capture the best of the series with its own take on tricking and parkour while also improving on it. So, is Jet Set Radio really as good as everyone thinks? Is it really worth the revival? Is it truly iconic? What's good, everybody out there on YouTube? This is your man Shadicstick dropping some hot fraga on this mic, and today we'll be discussing Jet Set Radio. I'll be discussing the game, how it has aged, and what I think of the game in the modern day and age. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, the like button, and the notification bell, and let's begin. So what makes Jet Set Radio enjoyable in the first place? I think this is an important question to ask because people, including myself, really enjoy this title. Is the gameplay really that appealing? I think it's the general flow of the game that really keeps people coming back to Jet Set Radio. The easy to follow but interesting story, the cool over-the-top graffiti art style, the arcadey approach to a skating game, the phenomenal soundtrack that mixes EDM, hip-hop, rock, and a myriad of counterculture genres of music to tie in all of the components of the game, making one of the most unique aesthetics in all of gaming history. The game initially released on the Dreamcast, and because of that, there's something so unabashedly Sega about this game. Despite that console's complete and utter failure to be successful, it is one of the few games and series that lived on past the Dreamcast's death. So what is it that attracts people to this game? The gameplay, or is it something more abstract? I believe it to be this game's aesthetic that carries the game. There's a few reasons I believe this, but I believe it is mostly down to how the gameplay loop punishes the player. Now, what do I mean by this? It sounds as if that the game punishing the player is a good thing. That's not what I mean. I'm saying the aesthetic of the game carries it above everything else, not the gameplay. It does kind of the inverse. The gameplay itself is solid, but not cohesive. The levels are not designed around how you move in the game. The difficulty spikes towards the midpoint of the game, and the movement just isn't tight, and the trick system isn't super well explained. It's not hard to master, but it always leaves you feeling like there's more to it than there actually is. Overall, this makes the game feel sluggish and sometimes skin deep. Because of these issues, I feel like playing this game in 2024 is just sometimes abysmal. That's not to say that there aren't ports to enjoy in its gameplay, because when it does all click together, it really clicks and it's really fun. That's not to say that much of the time you aren't fighting for your life, or you are fighting for your life. Parts of the level will be really well thought out, like the billboards in Bantam Street, or the placement of grind rails in Grind Square. But then you try to grind the crane in Shibuya-cho, if you know, you know, and realize it's genuinely one of the worst designed things in a video game. A lot of the game is like this. You'll see a ton of good or even great level design choices followed by some of the worst level design ever. Whether it be bad grind rail placement, random pits, bad collision detection, or some combination of the three. You can tell this game came out in 2000, and Sega ignored the precedent set by other games like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Combo lines are either obscured by the environment itself or the sluggish controls. This is compounded by the spike of difficulty in later levels. The early levels are pretty fun, but once you get about the halfway point of the game, they decide throwing waves of enemies at you is the best way to make the game more difficult, and making these enemies more obnoxious and difficult to deal with. To understand this, I have to explain how the levels and missions in Jet Set Radio work. In Jet Set Radio, you have 3 massive levels that get broken up based on 3 basic mission types, basically. You have races, graffiti tagging, the most common of the missions, and gang tag racing, where you tag 3 gang members until their HP hits 0. Fundamentally, they all work, but the one you'll see the most of is definitely the standard graffiti tagging levels. And that's where most of the frustration comes from. On top of this, you have the rival challenges that basically allow you to get new members, well, less so allow you and more so bar you from doing anything in the game, even the free play, until you complete them. In general, this game's faults, from a gameplay standpoint, all amount to cool ideas on paper, but not necessarily executed in the best of ways. I can see what they were trying to do with the level design, but some of it's too cramped and requires too much precision from the player. The loose controls to some degree put emphasis on the player mastering the controls, but the issue is that there are many times where something just can't be done in a level in the way it was intended due to this very loose and sluggish movement. And in general, I wish the trick system was both more complex and more intuitive. And don't get me wrong, this video may sound negative, but I do think the game is all around a solid package. While I despise how loose and sluggish the controls are in areas that are cramped, in the wide open areas that are built around it, the game gets really fun. This is even more fun when you start getting trick combos going. One thing about the game not having a ton of tricks is that once you start getting them going, you know what you can and can't do for the most part. When you're in the prime area of a stage for this, the good times start rolling. On top of that, the game has a genuinely great story. It's simple, but the way it's told via the underground radio, Jet Set Radio, is pretty novel and makes for a fun time. And despite me disliking how they limit your actions when a new rival appears, it does immerse you in the story and the world a little bit. Everything from the art direction, graphics, music, and story feel like they tie into each other for the supreme presentation experience. No other game really does this in the same way as Jet Set Radio, and I believe this is why things like the soundtrack, art, and characters are so popular. They create a world that the player can feel invested in without the gameplay, and many games to this day are still trying to replicate this. I hold this belief that not every game that is my favorite is good, and not every game I find good is my favorite. But I do believe most of the games I like have some redeeming qualities, and Jet Set Radio, despite all of its flaws, is a unique experience that I don't believe you can get anywhere else. And I think it's a game that, while you may not like, you should experience at least once in your life. But guys, thank you for watching this video. This is a video I've had on the back burner for some years, and I decided now was the time to make it because it was going to be a little bit of a bigger video. But tell me how you feel about Jet Set Radio if you've played it before. Tell me if you've ever thought about playing Jet Set Radio or any other games that it inspired, and maybe I'll make a video on something like that. But also, don't forget to become a channel member. I want to start posting people's names at the end of these videos, and if you join the $10 tier, you get to see your name in this video. But with that all out of the way, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Follow your boy on the Elon Musk app. And join the Discord. Links, as always, are down below. This has been your man, Shadicstick. Remember, Hot Frogger turns to Cold Blizzaga, and chill out some of my other videos. Peace. Have a good one.
Listen to the music. Listen to the music.